meeting friends and all these memories, and then getting hired to Second City. And that's all because Saturday Night Live was the point on the map. So, but all these amazing experiences that led me towards that goal. Did I get to SNL? No. But Jesus, what 5 years of my life in Chicago that was. And this sort of scrappy, cool, vagabond actor and leading this sort of bard's life was amazing. And so that's all that counts. Getting the golden ring, that would have been Saturday Night, well, that would have been a different journey and a different set of experiences, and then its own road and wherever that would have led. But having the destination so that you can at least run down the path, go on an adventure, waving that map, like, that's at least what gets you out there, to do it in the first place.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
This is a really incredible chat. Todd delivers the goods. He is thoughtful, thought-provoking, and overall a deep thinker with empathy and a great sense of humor. I really appreciate Todd doing this chat, especially since he did it on the day of his international trip from LA to Sydney, which is quite a brave task. We dive into so many beautiful topics, such as how each experience has been a pathway towards the next. I won't do it justice. You have to listen to it. It is simply captivating. So let's get into it and officially introduce Todd to the podcast. Todd Stashwick is an actor and writer. You can find him in almost every TV show with over 160 credits to his name. As an actor, you might recognize him from the role as Deacon on the hit show 12 Monkeys and Dale Malloy on the critically acclaimed The Riches. His work in television includes notable roles on shows such as Star Trek Picard, Buffy the Vampire, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Heroes, Supernatural, The Originals, Gotham and Justified. He can also be seen in the live-action Kim Possible films as the villain Dr. Drakken on Disney+. As a writer, Todd is the co-creator of the webcomic Devil Inside with collaborator comic artist Dennis Calero. Todd also co-wrote Clandestine, an original space adventure pilot. He also co-wrote a Star Wars video game for Electronic Arts and Lucasfilm with Uncharted creator Amy Hennig. He also co-wrote a draft of Suicide Squad 2, the sequel to the hit DC Comics films from Warner Brothers, with writer-director Gavin O'Connor. He recently completed co-writing the video game Forspoken for Square Ennix, and is currently working with a group of writers for an upcoming Marvel project with Skydance New Media. Todd is also deeply immersed in the Dungeons and Dragons community, which we dive deep into this chat. He regularly hosts games for his friends in his nerd lair. He also created a retro merchandise online store to celebrate his love of the game called Todd Stashwick's Nerd Circus, where he sells dice boxes, t-shirts, and more. He co-created a D&D inspired tiki cocktail book with former Imagineer with Brandon Clayler called Mystic Liberations, are available in the links below. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about his passions of Dungeons and Dragons, not getting SNL, his time at the Skywalker Ranch, rejection, improv, losing a house, moving forward, emulating Bill Murray, and experimenting with comedy, his unique view of success, creativity, and being in 21 pilots that don't go ahead. Before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. I just finished watching Ahsoka, and I heard that you've been on the Skywalker Ranch. I would love to hear about your experiences there.
So back in I guess I would say 16, maybe 2016, I was in the thick of writing for a Star Wars video game for EA. And part of the process, they were doing a bunch of scanning of Star Wars paraphernalia, I guess is the better way to put it, ships and weapons and whatnot for our game. And myself and Amy Hennig, who was she was the creative director of that game, we were invited to, we did it a couple times, but we were invited up to Skywalker Ranch to just as kind of a sabbatical to dig into the libraries, dig into the archives, and use it as inspiration for our video game. And so I was walked into the archives, which is this giant barn, and we walked among the shelves, and like there is Luke's lightsaber, there is Han's blaster, there is like matte paintings that were done by Ralph McQuarrie from the original films. Chewbacca is there, Leia's outfits are there, Indiana Jones' jacket is there, and the original Marlboro cigarettes that Harrison Ford smoked that he left in the pocket were there. And then the most, and I've shared this story before, the most kind of wildly magic, because you're not allowed to touch anything on the shelves because it's all there to be, preserved. But at a certain point, they hand you these surgical gloves and you snap them on your digits, and they take out these giant art folders and you open them up, and they are the original McQuarrie paintings.
Wow.
That were all of the look dev for the original film. And so you're literally leafing through that which was my childhood, because I had all of the programs from going to the movie, and then all of the Starlog magazines that had all the original McQuarrie art in them. And now I'm literally holding the very painting that the man painted, and I was overcome with emotion, and tears started to climb in my eyes, and I had to put them down and take a step away so that I did not weep on the McQuarrie painting. So that was pretty special. And then I would go for morning runs around Ewok Lake and look at Skywalker Sound, where it was one special day we were invited into Skywalker Sound to sit down with Ben Burt, who did Ben Burt is responsible for the sound of the lightsaber, for the sound of the pew, pew, pew. When we all go pew, 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 it's because of Ben Burt.
Oh, wow.
And so...
what an accomplishment.
Right? And so he's the guy, and we had originally met him. So one of the things, part of our research was in the Lucasfilm library, which is this gorgeous Victorian library with a stained glass dome and just books on kind of everything. Anything that inspired George is on these shelves. And one day we were sitting down, and this gentleman sat down wearing a Ridge Lost Ark hat, I believe. And I look over, and it's Ben Burt. And if you're a hardcore Star Wars nerd, you know who Ben Burt is. And I immediately clocked that it was him, so we started up a conversation. And then later we were brought into, this was a separate trip, but we went into Skywalker Sound to talk to them about sound design for our game. And Ben knew that I was a big Star Wars nerd. And we were there with Matthew Wood. Matthew Wood's claim to fame is he is the voice of the droids in the Clone Wars. Roger, Roger.
Ah,
And that's
yeah.
all. That's all
Yeah.
Matthew Wood. And he's also a sound designer, so he's kind of the heir in the way that Filoni is the heir apparent to George. Matthew Wood is the heir apparent to Ben Burtt, and Ben Burtt is still working, so I don't want to retire the man before his time.
Yeah.
But as we're sitting there, Ben goes, "Here, I want to show you something." And he goes into a cabinet behind me and he unlocks it, and he takes out a sheaf of paper and he plops it down in front of me, and it's got brass brands holding it together, and I look at it, and it says "The Star Wars: The Adventures of Luke Starkiller, 1976," and it was the original draft. And so he goes, "This was the draft that George gave me to see if I wanted to do the thing and any ideas I had." So as I leafed through literally the first draft of Star Wars, there are notes in the margin that like circled R2D2 and like a little note of ideas that Ben Burtt had about it. And then after I'm looking at this holy relic, Ben takes me up over to an old synthesizer, and he turns it on and he goes, "This is R2D2." And he starts hitting keys, and it's R2D2. Like it's the sounds of R2. And some of it was himself vocoded. Is literally Ben saying words into a thing that are filtered and that become R2D2. And then he walks me over to this other shelf, and he takes out this scuba thing, and it's like a little scuba gear thing, and he holds it up and he breathes into it. He goes, "This is the click of Darth Vader's breather." So like when you hear the intake, there's this little metallic click, it's because it was from a scuba diver's breather. So it was just, I mean, it was all this, the curtain is revealed, like pulled back, and I got to see the stuff that populated my childhood.
What a special moment. What do you think, we'll get into it, but I know you're a self-proclaimed nerd. What do you think the younger version of Todd would have said if you would see what you've accomplished and, being there on the ranch and had the opportunity?
He would say, "Yeah, this totally tracks." No, he would say, it's funny because there's two versions. It's like so much of my career, I got into it because I wanted to be Han Solo, and I wanted to be a Ghostbuster, and I wanted to be, my first action figures were Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. So I've always been holding this stuff in my heart and in my imagination. So the arrow was always pointed at that target in many ways. And I was a big dreamer as a kid. So in many ways, the belief that doing this stuff was not impossible to me made it possible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that the experiences are at all lost on me. I completely embrace and am humbled by the things. Like, let's be honest, Star Trek is the reason that I got to be in Sydney today. The worlds that this has opened up to me on my own planet, let alone the worlds that I've gotten to explore through writing video games and going to Skywalker Ranch and then working in space with my space family. All of those dreams were started when I was 6-year-old Todd.
It's so wonderful, and you've got one of the most credits I've ever seen in Hollywood. You're definitely in a smaller than 1% category. It's one thing to be a dreamer and, I want to be like the next Ghostbuster or whatever, but a lot of people have these dreams, but they might not necessarily achieve them for various reasons, or it might be outside of what they think they can achieve. I find that really interesting that you always thought that you could do that.
Well, the simple fact that there was a moment in my brain, and it happened when I was like on a road trip with my mom and dad, and it's a little tangential, but I was driving with my parents, and I couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, And I had a little cassette tape recorder. And on that cassette tape recorder, I was listening to Elvis. My mom was a big Elvis fan, and therefore that sort of tradition was passed on down to us, and we appreciated the king. So I remember listening to it, and then there was this click, and that click was, at a very young age, this is Elvis's job. Like, my dad gets up and he goes to work, and my mom gets up and she goes to work, and those are their jobs, and they come home, and Elvis gets up and he goes into a recording booth or onto a stage and plays guitar, and that's his occupation. And then the realization of, like, well, if it's his job, it's somebody's job. It could be somebody's job. So why not mine? Like, if the qualification at the very base is it's a person who has a job, well, I'm already a person. You know, it's like I see people on TV and I'm a person. So therefore, there's a version of my life where I could be on TV. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that knowledge of, well, if a person found their way to television, or in Elvis's case, to the recording booth, there's got to be a path to get there. So I just have to figure out what the path is. And that really sunk in around junior year of high school, that a person could be a professional actor.
Oh.
And therefore, I better start pointing my arrow at that target.
So you have to fill in the gaps. What I find really interesting in this example that you've given is what's the right path to follow for you. I think that you wanted to emulate, was it
Bill Murray?
Yeah, Bill Murray. And that's more from the improv side. Were you still
doing
doing
both? I mean, obviously, because I looked at Bill Murray because he was a Ghostbuster, and I was like, okay, I loved the blending of comedy and science fiction that Ghostbusters did. It was the perfect.
That's what I like to write personally. Yeah.
It's a perfect film. And if you and like Shaun of the Dead, it's like that blend of comedy and horror, comedy and genre. Even Star Wars is a very funny film. Rage of the Lost Ark has so much comedy in it. Truck, what truck? And so Bill Murray was just my hero because, you know, I was not an athletic kid. So there was something so like laissez-faire about him. Rolling Stone once described him as the ability to level institutions with the raise of an eyebrow. And I always admired his kind of lazy irreverence. He wasn't impressed with the wrong things. Do you know what I mean? Like money and whatnot in his films anyway. Or Station, he was only impressed by the quality of a human, not impressed by what they did or what their title was or how much money they had. He was impressed. He enjoyed people. And so I always dug that, and I always found him hilarious. His brand of comedy found funny. And so looking and then backing it up and going, well, then he was on Saturday Night Live. But before that, he was in Second City. And so I was already a Chicago boy, and I wanted to do Saturday Night Live. And so I just was sort of hell-bent for leather after college to go, well, I just got to get in Second City because that will be the first part of the plan.
I have many, many questions on this. Were you doing acting classes along the way, or was it improv?
I had a degree in theater by the time I left college. That was what I went to college for. I mean, I had done tons of acting in high school, and then that led to me going to college for acting. And then immediately after college, I went and got a job tearing tickets and hosting, seating people at Second City, bartending, and moving to Chicago and kind of just pushing myself into the improv scene because I knew that was one of the routes to Saturday Night Live.
I want to talk more on this. I've done a little bit of improv, and I think it's the greatest thing in the world. But it is so out of like the realm of what's normal in this world, and so I'm sure, like to one,
And yet, it's what we do literally every day with every conversation that we have with people.
yeah, yes, exactly. But I didn't ever realize it was a concept that you could pay money and attend classes for.
Yeah, right.
And then you obviously discover it. You fall in love with it. You're one of the OGs, and we'll talk about all the stuff that you've done. Was it? Did you even know that improv existed, or because you loved this guy so much?
I had heard about. Well, I mean, I knew Second City existed because of Bill Murray and SCTV. Like I grew up with those as sort of mainstays, cornerstones of comedy. And, I was the kid that would stay up late and turn on the TV and keep it down so my parents thought I was still asleep to watch David Letterman and to watch Saturday Night Live. So if you figure in 1975, I was, let's see, how old was I? I was 7 or 8. That's when SNL started. I probably came really on my radar, catching up with Belushi and all of those cats. So like from a very young age, I was kind of mainlining Saturday Night Live, and that was a common language amongst my friends. And then in the late 80s, it was Kids in the Hall, and obviously always Monty Python underneath it all for the absurdism. And so that was my comedy school, was that. And then pointing my sights towards Saturday Night Live, well, the only place that I could realistically see what getting there was through doing good work at Second City. And I was auditioned for Saturday Night Live in 95. I was flown out to New York, and I stood where the host does his monologue, and I gave it my all. They didn't hire me, but it was enough of a... the wind was filling the sails in that direction, enough to say, hey, it's time to leave Chicago. Yeah.
I have even more questions on this. I want to pigeonhole not getting SNL because I find this really fascinating. I heard that you recently, or I don't even know what recently is with podcasts, you recently looked back at your tape and you were actually impressed with it. And I think that's really awesome.
Well, yeah, I watched and I was 27 in 95. I was 26 when I auditioned for Saturday Night Live, 27 when I moved to New York. So at 26 years old, I look at my Saturday Night Live audition tape, and I realized that for the last 5 years, I'd been doing nothing but improv and sketch comedy. So those muscles were like it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger, in Pumping Iron. Like if you're spending all of your time pumping iron, when you get on that stage, well, all the muscles are there and flexed and in great shape because you have toned your machine to be but one thing. And so when I look back at my SNL audition, I was a tightly manufactured comedy machine at that age.
I love it.
So I look at it and I go, yeah, no, it was good. I was good. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't. And I can be proud of the fact that I was good enough to get that audition.
I love that. I still want to pigeonhole the SNL because there's so many questions.
Let's rabbit hole down this one.
I want to know, like, when you first discovered improv, were you good? Did it instantly click something for your soul? Did you feel this moment where you're like, this is where I need to be?
Yeah, there's several moments. I think it's never one. We always are climbing to the next plateau, and then we think, now I've got it, and then you climb to another plateau, and you go, what was I thinking? Now I've got it. I would say I have two like Machu Picchu's of improvisation for me, where I was like, okay, this is what it really is. And I had done 2 different shows. And they were after Chicago. I mean, I think Chicago is a proving ground. And it got me in great places. I don't think I ever I had great scenes, but Chicago is very much short form improvisation and it's
that's what
game
I've done.
driven.
Yep.
And then there's the other version, which is long form improvisation, where you perform for an hour without a script and maybe not even a suggestion. So I learned a ton of skills in Chicago that I got to, I would say, put into real practice, sort of rubber meets the road, in New York with a group called Burn Manhattan that I co-created with a bunch of wonderful people, directed by Shira Piven, who's married to Adam McKay, the sister of Jeremy Piven. She is a tremendously, she's a talented director, and she's also a kind of a great experimental improvisational teacher, instructor, and director.
Cool.
She's a brilliant woman. And so she took all of us knuckleheads, who many of us moved from Chicago and some of us were from New York, and she took our very commercial sensibility and gave it this very avant-garde approach. And so the work that came out of that, I was very proud of. And we did that for 5 years in New York, which was Burn Manhattan. Then I moved to Los Angeles, and I was like, well, I don't want to, try and make lightning strike twice. So I want to take what I did and build on it. And then I had this notion to go, what would improv look like if it was in turn of the century London, in Victorian London, and we were all dead? And so I co-created this group called The Doubtful Guests, which was the idea that we were all killed in a brothel fire in 1888 London, and our souls were damned to do an improvised show. Yeah. So it was this macabre cabaret with these very Edgar Allan Poe, Edward Gorey-esque stories, full cabaret makeup and tattered, burned turn of the century costumes, and with these awful people who were doing this improvised show.
Oh, wow.
We were people who were playing characters, and so we were these characters, we were these humans who were ghosts, who then had to do an improvised show that we would then play the magistrate in the local pub. Like it was this strange little, we called it a petite guignol. It was very violent. It was very, very funny. We would improvise songs. We took it kind of to many improv festivals, and we've been doing it off and on for over 20 years.
Wow. 20 years. Wow.
Yeah, the group formed in 2021.
Okay. This is fascinating. So you obviously been doing improv for a long time.
I'm a song and dance man. Yeah.
Part of your DNA, your blood. And so, you were teaching for a while. You've obviously started your own improv group, and I think you started your own improv school. Correct me if I'm wrong.
For a little bit, I co-ran an improvisation school for 8 years. Yeah, called the Hot House.
Was that easy for you? Because the improvisers just go with the flow, and then the business owners.
It's not just that. That's like saying basketball players don't have parameters.
Yep.
When the whistle blows, the ball goes where it goes, but the players are trained in certain moves and certain ways to stay in sync with each other so that one side can get the ball through the hoop, right? So improv is a lot of practicing of ways to share the space together in a cohesive, cooperative manner. It isn't just, I say what I want when I want.
Yep.
It's much more listening and heightening and building off the last thing the last person did, so that we always say, the best plays look like they're improvised, and the best improvisation looks like it's written. Mm-hmm. And so we would have people come up to us in the Burn Manhattan show or in a Doubtful Guest show and say, how much of that was written? We were like, none of it. And they couldn't believe it, just because of the level of agreement going on stage, and the level of acting in the of course. You treat everything that's happening like it's exactly what's supposed to be happening. So therefore there's no mistakes on stage. It's all there to build the moment and the story and the theatrical style.
You said a really important word, agreement. When I first started doing improv, I'm still not, but I was particularly a bad improviser because I didn't master the agreement side. I
The
saw
yes
improv.
and of it all.
Say that again.
The yes and of it all.
Yes, look, I got that, but I think I tried to win too much. I've done a lot of work on it. I'm much better, but it taught
Sure.
me a lot about life and
Yeah.
some of the key points you've
One
said.
of the most. It's yeah.
I speak about this a lot, so I'd rather hear you tell me about it. But I think that improv should be like mandatory at schools, for example, because not only the yes, yeah, you should tell
There's
me.
there's no finer. The skills are sort of applicable on so many levels.
Yep.
It's because at its very base, it's about valuing other. And, I have no idea what I'm going to do next until I pay fierce attention to what you're doing. And using your partners as raw material and they using you as raw material to build theater out of.
And in that space, you mentioned and wrote it down, you're valuing another person as well. We can think of a lot of career work, for example. Yeah, career work might be the best way of saying it. It's all about us. But with improv, you succeed together. And that's
Yeah.
something
But that's also true about all acting, right? Like
Yes.
it's not, even if you're doing a one-man show, you need a director and you need a producer. So it's always a group effort.
That's true, but in bad acting, you can just say the lines, not listen to the other actor, and it won't be good. But you can go about it that way.
But acting is improvising, but you happen to be saying what the writer wrote, because it's always about having an organic thought underneath the moment based on what your partner's doing, regardless of what the script has you saying.
Yep.
Because rarely do you want the line to be what the character is thinking.
That's a very interesting perspective. I see it as like a collaboration of 2+ souls together. I think I heard that when you first started, these are your words, you've obviously changed, you've gone through a huge journey, that you were self-righteous and a little bit arrogant and you made mistakes along the way. And you're smiling now, so
I'm trying to remember where you read that and what was it pertaining to.
it was just more about what you learned in the whole improv experience. It's summarizing, but those were some of the words.
I think I was probably definitely sanctimonious. I think I got into it that I was going to like change the world with my funny skits and songs, thinking that I had to be this proletariat theater, realizing that you catch more flies with honey, and so so you can bury your message in the funny and have it carry a far longer way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just find it very interesting in how improv, for me, it changes how I see a human and how I interact with a human. We'll get into the collaboration and the play and the fun in a bit, but to me, it taught me, the value of a human and succeeding together. And since doing my improv, I view everything as I have an abundance mindset, or that's how I call it, where it's kind of shared success, where if someone succeeds, I succeed. And even if I have nothing to do with it, it's still a win for us.
And it's also focusing on the moment. There's no end game except for making that moment the best moment it can be.
Yeah.
And it is only good if it is shared.
Ooh, that's a very interesting perspective. Before I forget, because I said I'd pigeonhole it 100 times, the SNL aspect. You've been in improv for ages. You've set kind of your trajectory to be, go a certain direction. You've started schools. You've been in huge improv groups. You've built a name for yourself. You're a teacher as well. You're very proud of your work, and obviously you've gone in a really awesome direction. What was kind of that moment, if you remember, when you were told that you wouldn't be involved in SNL?
Oh, of course, I was super sad, right? Like, because we were flown out. I was a kid too. I was 26. You're flown out to New York and you're put up at a lovely hotel with your friends, and you go out into a room that you've only seen through your television, and you stand there again, like where I've seen countless of people do their monologue in front of the band. That's where we stood to do our audition.
Yeah.
And you just feel this, you feel the wheels of your life moving forward and in the direction that you want them to go, or that you've prescribed they should go. And then you're told you might want to start looking for an apartment here because you did good. And you're like, okay, good.
Wow.
And then you get back to Chicago, and then the sweater starts to unravel, and the phone calls start coming in frequently, and then you finally get that last phone call, and like, yeah, it's not happening. And you're like, I was young, and that was aside from getting hired to Second City, and look, I've had so many series of wins, like just getting cast in that lead in high school. That's a huge moment. It's I've had enough wins and successes to keep me moving through the failures, or not even failures, just the rejection. I don't consider rejection a failure. It's just not getting the thing that you had set in your sights at that moment.
I heard you on another podcast, and I'm butchering how you said it, but essentially the premise was often we plan for one thing and then it doesn't happen, and and when that thing doesn't happen, often it leads to something unexpected and often better.
Well, it always does, because then otherwise you're just in a series of crushing failures, right? So it always leads to something, because that's the nature of existence. Is you plan to go down this road, that road suddenly is flooded out. You're like, oh, I have to take this left. And then I take that left, and then I meet that person who ends up, changing my life. That had I not gone that left, I wouldn't have met them. But I think it's more of a framework of perception that you go, there's no wrong turn. There's just having an openness and an awareness to discovery, and then all the skills of improvisation: heighten, explore, dig deeper, make your partner look better, all of those things. So no matter what, if we are rigid and we say, well, shit, that road was blocked off, therefore I am a failure. And then you have your head down and you walk past that person, or you walk past that pub that would have had that poster on the wall, that would have inspired that story that you wrote, that unlocked this to that, to this to that. But if you just walk down that road going, well, that road was blocked off and I'm a failure because it was blocked off, well, that's no life at all.
And
if we walk towards the road that's blocked off, and instead of getting angry at it, if you have that, and I don't believe in predestination, but I do believe in opportunity. If I go, wow, that blocked off road has me going left, what an opportunity to discover something I didn't plan on. And people ask me, what do you want to do next? And I said, the thing I didn't plan on.
It's a very rare outlook on life, and not many, a lot of us can talk the talk, but I know that you actually live your life this way, to actually be in the flow. And I'm wondering, there's so many things that pop up. Was that through like the improv training, or were you born like this? Is this a parental thing, or just learned experience?
Yes to all of those. I mean, I think we are the sum of our experiences. I don't think there's just one. And I think because I could back up and say what drew me to improv in the first place was this, like, look, I look at, as a kid, looking at Bill Murray, and here was a guy on screen that maximized every opportunity he was in to make it joyful. There's rarely a disappointed moment in his on-screen personas, right? And I connect with that. You see him in Meatballs. It doesn't age well in many ways, but there are moments in it where you just go, he's like Bugs Bunny. He just sort of stumbles into Ferris Bueller, right? He just stumbles into the next thing and goes, there's opportunity here for joy. And if our only purpose on this planet is to be in a state of joy, well, then improv is that, right? Because you're in a constant state of discovery, and it's basically a celebration of consciousness. And so I was always drawn towards those characters. It doesn't mean I don't have plans and I don't have structures. I am not just with a bindle on my shoulder wandering down the tracks. I mean, I'm not allergic to money. I'm not allergic to success. I enjoy those things, but I more enjoyed the feeling I get when I'm in that place of flow.
Okay.
Right? It's
Yeah.
not the accumulation of stuff or title, which don't suck, but it's more a feeling you get when you're in that state of flow. And improvisation is a very distilled nuclear reactor version of the state of flow, where you really kind of rope off all other distractions and just go, we are just going to go into this for the state of flow.
I am going to get you as a co-host on this podcast. For another
All my
topic.
time.
Yeah. We'll do it when we do Dungeons and Dragons.
I'm all in.
So this is I wouldn't even say a skill set. I'd say it's an important life skill, which,
It's an operating system,
as in how you see.
the world.
Yeah, I do with the brain. And in this industry in particular, you've probably heard the word no more times than yes. You've had opportunities, like we talked about the Skywalker Ranch experience. I think you've written a few things as well that may have not gone to what other people would call the plan.
Fruition. Yeah.
Say that again.
Fruition. Yeah.
Fruition, yes, thank you. A lot of things, I think I heard that, you got a pilot, but it didn't go ahead. All of these things.
21 of them.
21? I did not. Okay. Well, okay. So even something like that, the no's, the expectations, a mastery skill in this space and in life for me is to be able to, go with the flow as you've spoken about. But this is also an industry where, you need money, and if you get that no, it can impact one's self-worth, their self-esteem. It can impact a whole bunch of things, but it sounds like it doesn't really bother you. You're human, you still feel things, but you're able to bounce back pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, if we didn't have positions on the map, then we couldn't set out on a journey, right? And those positions on the map are the things that we want. I want to be on a network television show. Okay, great. Which one? I want, at the time, to be on a half-hour sitcom. Great. Well, that's going to determine what kind of class I take, what my headshot looks like, and what city I live in. So, okay, so all those things are a want in my soul. So therefore, they determine what I'm doing in the now. It's a decision to put out. Now, does that mean I will get the half-hour sitcom? No. But I'm loving all the steps that it's taking to get there. I'm loving going to this class that's teaching me half-hour sitcom skills. I'm loving having a photo session. I'm loving going in for auditions and breaking down half-hour sitcom copy. I don't anymore. It's not something I'm pursuing anymore. But at the time, like early 2000s, after Saturday Night Live didn't happen. So I wanted Saturday Night Live. Well, that got me to Chicago and got me in the improv scene and doing Improv Olympic and studying with Del Close and studying with McNapier and studying at Second City. And and meeting friends and all these memories, and then getting hired to Second City, and that's all because Saturday Night Live was the point on the map. So, but all these amazing experiences that led me towards that goal. Did I get to SNL? No. But Jesus, what 5 years of my life in Chicago that was.
Oh, yeah.
And this sort of scrappy, cool, vagabond actor and leading this sort of bard's life was amazing. And so that's all that counts. Getting the golden ring, that would have been Saturday Night, well, that would have been a different journey and a different set of experiences, and then its own road and wherever that would have led. But having the destination so that you can at least run down the path, go on an adventure, waving that map, like, that's at least what gets you out there to do it in the first place.
I've said this word a lot, but it's true. There's a very unique and profound mindset because often we can focus. I do this. We all do this, not you. We focus on, the end goal. And if we don't get it, it can be hard in the moment or even with a bit of time to see, okay, I didn't get SNL, but I got...
That was hard. Not getting SNL was hard.
Yep. But in the
Maybe
sense...
sad.
Which, it's very important to feel our emotions and go through that. But to have this mindset, which I find very contagious, is just the example you gave to go, didn't get SNL, I felt the emotions, I went through it. But look at the life experience of what I learned, what I gained, and it put me on another...
Well, I also say that at 55.
Yes, but it's...
But at 26, when I didn't get SNL, I was a sad Todd.
Yeah.
And so, but it still was a go... There's still enough to say, hey, I got to get out of Chicago.
So that was the catalyst?
I've done everything I think I need to and want to do in Chicago.
Yep.
And I have agents that were excited that I was at least up for Saturday Night Live, that whatever I was doing in Chicago got the attention of network television. So it drew me east. And then I wanted that life experience of living in New York, knowing eventually I'd like to go to LA. But I at least wanted to live in New York for some time and be a New Yorker. That's where, where I got married and where my son was born and where I did Burn Manhattan. And, amazing things happened in New York that set the stage for Los Angeles. So it's all very much about what I'm doing in the now. It does not mean it's the old proverb, one eye on the mountain, one eye on the path.
Very interesting. And I would imagine, giving the example of, not sure what the right word is, but the no's and the rejection and the expectations, all of that. Yeah. When did you decide to get your tattoo or one of your tattoos, what was it? This too shall pass.
This too shall pass. After I lost a house. We lost, there was a writer's strike in 2007, right as my second child was born, and we had moved. I was on a TV series that then got canceled, and then there was a writer's strike, and then there was a housing crisis, and I ended up losing a house. And, moving back into a place that I was unable to sell, and I'm setting up a bed in a room that I had not slept in for 3 years, that I had left, thinking you moved past something, right? Like we think of our life like these are phases. This was the phase I lived here, and then we lived here. But I had gone from living here back into a place that I thought I was done with.
Okay, gotcha.
And it wasn't done with me. And so I think it was around that time when all of that was happening to go, all right, this next tattoo, because I think it was my second tattoo, was to be this too shall pass. Because I like the sentiment on both sides of that coin, which is smoke them if you got them, because you're not always going to have them. So this too shall pass. So enjoy the good times while they're here. And on the flip side, when the wind is in your face and the tempest is swelling, strap yourself to the mast, because that too shall pass. The storm will pass, and there are calmer waters ahead. So I think it's such a great sentiment
Agreed.
to be reminded of in good times and bad. Like have the cognizance to have the gratitude for when things are good, because they're not always going to be good. You're going to lose your father sometimes. You're gonna have loss, and you're going to have pain, and you're going to have tribulation. So enjoy the good, because it's precious and fleeting. And also, don't sweat the bad so hard, because it's also precious and fleeting.
It's pretty remarkable that in that moment, going through all of that, it's an enormous stress. It actually reminds me of a story. I'm not sure if you ever met him, but he was in
The story of Job? No, I'm kidding.
Sean Gunn. He was in Suicide Squad too, and he's
I think I've met Sean. I've met James. I don't know if I've met Sean, but I feel like I have. But I've been in LA for 23 years. So
you've met everyone while hiking, I assume. I think that's how it goes in LA. Essentially, not doing justice to his story, he's been on the podcast. Wonderful, wonderful man. He similar in the sense of he was losing his house, and I think he was going to have to give up his house, and he was in a low point in his life, and similar kind of mindset to you, and kind of had this openness that things would be okay, even though it's extremely stressful in the moment.
Well, the reality is life, and I will, I will be the first to admit, circumstance of privilege, right? Like I was an educated white man growing up in America, and all three of those things tilt success in my favor. And so I'm cognizant of that. And so when times are tough, I recognize, so take that specific interest. Life had organized itself, and my efforts and the efforts of many got me to a place where I could have that house in the first place and have that job on network television that allowed me to have that state of abundance, right? So knowing that it was achievable once, well, it's achievable again, and then maybe the mark of success isn't achieving those things.
Interesting. Just to tie up the Sean thing, eventually, people can listen to the podcast, but it's essentially, going through that, and I think he got Guardians of the Galaxy, and it changed his life.
Yeah,
but
sure.
what you're also what I'm interested in is that still that I agree with everything you said. Still that state of stress when you're going through something which is very hard, and it's individual to you, to still kind of be able to, I kind of see like you're driving a car and it's quite foggy and you've got the windscreen wiper, to still be able to see a little bit can be very hard, because that stress is enormous and it's relative to you, and you still, yeah.
I also have a lot of Midwest humility, which is, I lost a house in Laurel Canyon. Well, it's not what Beirut. It's not like there are people crossing borders with children in their arms to try to get them away from war-torn countries. And I go, a part of me holds that space that goes, your problems are problems, and they're stressful. They're also champagne problems. They're not cancer. You're still able to eat, and you're still getting employed in the field that you're employed in. You just were unable to hold on to that swanky house in Laurel Canyon. So for John, actor man, because this too shall pass.
Last thing on that, I appreciate the mindset and what you shared. Just on my end, and I'm not saying you had this, there could also be potentially a shame element, because you've got a family. And when we've got the negative emotions, we've got shame, there's probably other stuff that can also kind of like cloud us. But what I'm gathering and looking into, it sounds like we all have an ego, but you're able to kind of look at the ego speak to the ego and not let it,
Well,
cloud.
as my wife and I have discussed, like when my son was born, we had a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, New York. So it's like, I know what it's like to scrape by and try to make our dreams come true with nothing, with my son's crib in our bedroom as we are, living in New York City with their cost of living and figuring that out and forging forward. So it's like, I know how to take 2 sticks and make fire. Like, that's okay. We need this much to get by and be happy. We were fortunate that we were able to have this much. Well, then it shrunk back to this much. Okay, it's still not a hovel. Like, we're doing fine. And as much as it was a blow to the ego because we tell ourselves we've achieved a certain plateau and we don't ever want to turn around from that plateau, it's okay if we have to, because we know what it's like to rub 2 sticks together to make fire.
I really like that. And I like you got a philosophical mindset. You obviously are a deep thinker. I'm just wondering, are you a meditator? Have you done a lot of? You are? Okay. Tell me how you got into it.
Meditation, years ago, I think probably the seeds of it got sowed. There was a man named Master Lou who would have guided meditation, and he was an acupuncturist, and he helped me. I had like a sty in my eye, and he helped me alleviate the pain of that. I went to doctors. I had surgery on it. It would be it was gross. I would have it drained, and it would come back. And then he put a bunch of needles in my head, and then asked me some more esoteric questions about it.
Is this my language?
And he would say, "What were you trying not to see?" As if my body was blocking out something, and then I burst into tears, and then he had these recorded tapes that were guided meditations and breathing exercises that I then got into from that. And so that was probably my foray. And I, for the most part, probably find I meditate at least 5 days a week for 20 minutes a day.
Yeah. Okay. You're speaking my language. Long story short, when that person said, "What are you not trying to see?" I had a similar experience where I used to be an accountant. I'm now doing this and screenwriting and other stuff. And my back would kill me when I was working as an accountant. But then as soon as I left the building, I wasn't sore. I didn't have the awareness to realize that my back wasn't always sore. It was just in that environment because it was not right for me in that moment. And pretty much dedicated my life to studying on that side, and I incorporate that in my writing, or most of my writing. And it's remarkable what's kind of out there, and it sets us on a path.
The body knows.
Yes.
The body knows, yeah.
So it sounds like you've got a very deep understanding of yourself, your soul, and what you're
I don't know about that, but I'm still looking.
You're very modest. So we're doing meditation for a while. Was that also kind of life-changing for you? Is it?
It's so quiet. It's so quiet. And like, I only know the life that I'm living at the time that I'm living it. So to say life-changing, it wasn't like suddenly I took a hard left and I'm now on a different place. It all just kind of happens gradually. I know that I'm happy. I mean, doesn't mean I don't get the blues, and doesn't mean I don't compare and despair, and doesn't mean that I don't have grief and frustration and all of those things. But I think fundamentally the golden thread through all of it is happiness.
We're jumping all over the gun. From the joy perspective, I think you said, or I heard, or I read it somewhere, I don't even know, that your meaning of life is to play and have fun. And I thought that was...
Yeah, but isn't that it? Like, what else would it be?
Well, there are many different theories which I don't agree with.
Give me an example.
Well, the meaning of, to enjoy life, to laugh, those are kind of the ones that I go by. I'm just trying to think about what...
give me an example of another meaning.
As in other people's or my perspective?
Yeah, another person's. What's the meaning of life?
Well, there's the negative ones where they say there is no meaning of life and life is meaningless and pointless, which I don't subscribe to.
So therefore, if it has no meaning, it only has the meaning you ascribe to it at the moment.
Yeah, so essentially, aren't you saying the meaning of life is what we give it to? So, but still, so then based on what you're saying, which is something I agree with, you've assigned that your meaning of life, and thus the meaning of life is to play and have fun.
Yeah, but I guess it just, and, I've talked about this quite a bit, which goes back to Alan Watts of it all. Like, the starter pistol from birth forward, it's what we fill in there. And so some people's play is going to church and giving devotions every day, or being a monk, or being, in the Tour de France bike race. Like, that's all play. So I don't just mean being silly and that. Like, play, it means something. My wife will spend hours nurturing the soil, and shaping the garden, or hours. She's sitting right here. Hours with a pen in her hand, writing, and that is a form of play. That is a celebration of consciousness or existence that isn't about eating, clothing yourself, protecting yourself, or sheltering yourself. Those are, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like those very basic things. We eat, we shelter, we remain healthy, and we protect ourselves. So that what? Why do we do all of that? So that we can sit by the fire with a book, so that we can raise a whiskey with our friends, so that we can play Dungeons and Dragons, so that she can write for 3 hours. Like, we do all these other things so that we can get to the reason that we are alive. The thing that, like, when people casually use the phrase, "Oh, it's what I live for." Yes, that's what you're saying. It's what you live for. My mother loves to garden and cook. It's what she lives for. It's why she lives. That is the form of play. It is the celebration of consciousness, because if not any of those things, then it literally is just a ticking off of a list of things that support existence, which is eating, shelter, protection.
It's very, I've been on this journey, is probably the worst way of saying it, for probably a decade now. But the previous Michael, even though it's all the same element of Michael, wouldn't have seen life the way that we're talking about it now. I would have just seen it as a means to an end, which is a very pessimistic way of living. But then, I don't go on.
Go ahead.
No, so I think going through that existence was merely about ticking a box of just surviving. And then, looking deep within myself, I now feel like I'm going from a thriving mindset, which is what I feel you're talking about now.
Well, also, Watts would argue that life isn't even a journey. He would argue that it's a dance. It's like a journey is to meet a destination, in many ways. A dance is what you do while the music's playing.
He was a very wise man.
Oh, he's great.
I've seen a few quotes over the years, and he's had a profound impact on the consciousness of the planet, which is not a small order.
Not a small order, yeah.
From the D&D side, Dungeons and Dragons, this is also something that really interested me. I know that there's so much we can talk about, and we have to do it another time. But I'm wondering what that does for your soul, because it's incorporating all the things we've spoken about: play and fun. You get to collaborate. You're in the moment. I don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons. I've just been watching Community, and they do some really good episodes on it. And the way that you talk about it is wonderful to hear. I'm just wondering, why did you get back into Dungeons and Dragons, and what has that also done for your soul?
Well, it was a big part of my childhood, and it was fellowship. Now, I would say it does scratch a nostalgic itch, definitely. But it's very much, look, I ran an improv theater company, more than one. I don't have the energy or effort, nor do I want to rent the rehearsal space for and charge tickets and hope we have a house. So D&D gives me the opportunity to gather people, improvise a story, scratch a nostalgic itch, and indulge my love of fantasy, and have an excuse to order pizza and drink bourbon. Like they show me what it doesn't satisfy.
Another thing on that, it's interesting because I think you stopped for about 34 years.
Yeah, a very long time.
And I think, it's your story, so correct me, but essentially you thought that adults don't necessarily do this, and then you met someone who said he's been
Well, I didn't know adults did it.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I didn't think they did. I didn't know they did. And then I found out that they did, and then I was like, oh, well, then the permission was given for me to do it.
It sounds like, or at least for a long period, that you know yourself and what you're about. Because I know when I was younger, and I'm not saying this to you whatsoever, I would have potentially have been too worried what other people would have thought, because being a nerd may have not been cool. You're shaking your head. So you know exactly what you're about. You couldn't care in that regard.
No, when I was 4'11", I played D&D, and when I'm 6'2", I played D&D.
I love it.
I kind of, to say that I didn't care what people thought would be a misnomer, because I got into entertainment because I wanted applause, right? That's caring what people think about your behavior.
Yep.
That's all that acting is. I behave this way. Like it, please.
Yeah.
It may be, a facsimile of human behavior, but no, as a kid, I had my tribe of people. Wasn't
Nice.
athletic, but I had my tribe, and we were nerds. Like, we had our Close Encounters t-shirts, and we played D&D and listened to Styx, and we didn't. Well, first of all, I wasn't bullied probably because I was funny, which was a great defense mechanism against being bullied.
Yeah.
Second, I had no trouble. I wasn't the kind of nerd that had a lack of confidence meeting girls. I wasn't that nerd. I was the comedian. So like, I was meeting girls and playing D&D. So it wasn't like I was hiding from some sort of social structures in junior high school by playing D&D, where that was the only place I was feeling acceptance. I was well received, fortunately. I wasn't having sand kicked in my face. D&D was just a form that like I just didn't hide the fact that I loved imagined worlds.
That's so nice. And I would imagine also that it would help massively with creativity as well. And also tying
Plus,
it with...
I married a hottie who also loves this stuff.
Oh, I didn't know that you guys play together. That's very
She just
adorable.
raised her, yeah. Well, she has a Dune tattoo on her arm.
Oh, I'm
She
excited.
had read Lord of the Rings long before I did. She's now poking her head up over. Hi. She she celebrates the stuff as much, and some of it is different versions of the stuff than me, so we complement each other. And
Nice.
but when I said, I'm coming to the Southern Hemisphere, I want to do all the Lord of the Rings stuff in New Zealand, she's like, yeah, we're going to Hobbiton. Of course we are. Yeah.
I'm very jealous. I'm not jealous. I'm very proud that you guys have got that and you get to go to New Zealand. What we're going to do now to wrap up the podcast is to do a rapid fire segment.
Great.
So first thing that springs to mind, actually last point, from the creativity side, I would imagine that both we said D&D and the meditation would help and allow for that flow as well. Has that been your experience? You can make it rapid fire if you want.
I'm a writer as a profession and an actor as a profession. So like, I'm currently co-writing on a Captain America Black Panther video game for Skydance and Marvel. And then I'm an actor. So my day job is creativity, and then my pursuits, whether it's D&D or meditation, are all about opening channels as well. So I get it everywhere. It's not an outlet, but I would say like D&D is all mine. I don't need network approval. I don't get notes from corporate.
Nice. To you.
Yep.
Back to the rapid fire. Where do you get your ideas from?
Oh, dude, I couldn't tell. Like the living world, my own. Yeah, I don't know where ideas come
You mentioned the open channel, so there's
shapes and clouds, man. I don't know.
What's been your?
They're everywhere. They're everywhere. They're everywhere.
What's been? I won't comment on these because I'll derail them. What's been your special ingredient to work all these years?
Special ingredient?
Yeah.
The why not of it all. Just the audacity.
And why did you create? What is and why did you create the Nerd Lair?
The Nerd Lair is my garage. Are you talking about the Nerd Lair or the Nerd Circus? Because those are two different things.
But I'll get into the Nerd Circus. But
okay,
yeah.
The Nerd Lair was a sanctum sanctorum created so that me, my friends, and family would have a place to just escape and celebrate our nerdiness for us. That wasn't necessarily for public consumption. It was just a place for us to play games and chill and also celebrate that spirit of imagination that started for me in the 70s and 80s. I've got a low battery. Yeah, so that was the Nerd Lair. The Nerd Lair was created as a play space. It's a place for, it's the chocolate room in Willy Wonka.
It looks fantastic. It looks like, and you made it yourself, I believe. It looks unbelievable. People can check it out on your Instagram page. And
it's fun. It's fun. You wanted a place where people could go. Well, like for me, it was creating the 70s, 80s basement of my dreams. And a place where people can walk in and just kind of gasp a little and look at all the fun. Like, I love those curio shops where the walls are filled with stuff, and comic book shops and game shops, and to create a space to play D&D in that just felt right, that we get lost in, and lose ourselves in.
It looks, they say the man cave. It looks like
it's not a man cave. It's a Nerd Lair, because nerdery is not gender specific.
Well said. It just looks like this environment where you can just go in and be yourself and, marvel at the beauty that you've kind of created.
My daughter plays in it as much as I do. And so therefore,
nice.
Tis no man cave.
And the Nerd Circus? Why did you create this?
Nerd Circus is my company that I formed to sort of take the spirit of the Nerd Lair and give the world access to that vibe of nerdery that I love. That late 70s, early 80s vibe. There was a very specific, they captured it really well in Stranger Things, but there's a very specific vibe to that era of being a kid. And I wanted to give that vibe to people, to share it in a way that they could share my joy with me. Because you just like, it's all about tribe building,
Yeah.
Whether it's building an improv group or forming an improv school or creating an improv D&D campaign. The Nerd Circus is, I just keep doing different versions of the same thing.
And I'll put that in the episode notes as well so people can check it out. I think there's a few things that people can buy if they're interested in. Looks very interesting. What are you most proud of?
My kids.
What was it?
When I look at my son and my daughter, and look at the people that they have become or are becoming, and the work that my wife and I have put into them, and they inspire me and they make me laugh, and I marvel at them. Like they are their own people, and there is so little insecurity in my kids, and they are chasing down their own version of joy, and it tickles me to no end.
That is a profound answer. You've kind of answered this, but we'll see where we go. Next big dream or goal?
Like if I was going to put another pin in a map, there's a couple. I would love to have a major role in a big old summer popcorn franchise film. A Marvel, a Star Wars, a one of those, a Mission Impossible, like, because those are the films that I was a Raiders of the Lost Ark Star Wars kid, Close Encounters, like those were the things that inspired me and lifted me out of my seat, and I just kind of want to be part of giving that experience to other people. So I would like that. I don't have, as much as I love like There Will Be Blood and whatnot, I don't have the burning need to go be a cobbler in Italy for 6 months so that I can do an A24 indie film. I wouldn't turn that down, but I would like to do the big things, the big fun things that inspired me to be the person I am. And then I also, I'm working on, I want to craft something new and original in the fantasy TTRPG space, whether it's a campaign setting or something like that. That would be fun.
That is very cool. What was that moment when you first got to sit in the chair or put on the Starfleet jacket like?
Those are two different moments.
Yep.
The first moment sitting in the chair, I just came to set to be fitted for my Starfleet uniform, and then they brought me to set. Terry Metalis brought me to the bridge of my ship, and I got to see my bridge and where my science officer would be, and my helmsman, and my communications, and navigation, and pilot, and I got to sit in my chair, and that was pretty. It's just silly. It's also silly and wonderful. Putting on the uniform, well, that makes it real, because then I wore that thing for 6 months. And then after 6 months, a new reality came in. A year and 6 months later, that suit was on a mannequin in a glass case in the Chinese theater. Like that which I wore to work every day was on a mannequin as part of a museum piece that was part of a legacy. And that was cool too.
I'm surprised you didn't
It was as cool to wear the uniform as to see the uniform on a mannequin.
I'm sure it was a profound moment, and I'm surprised you didn't borrow it or got lost or you stole it.
I don't need to. It already stunk of my sweat.
Last two. What makes you a great villain, and is it your resting villain face?
I don't know that I'm a great villain, and my resting villain face is it's a gift of genetics, I guess, and the abuse of my vocal cords so that I sound like this. What makes playing villains fun is a better way for me to answer that question,
Yes.
and I've answered it before. Whenever there's a character who is dark, I try to find the comedy. Whenever a character is comedic, I try to find the darkness. And so I think people have responded to me playing villains because they're like, oh shit, he's funny. Like that's that other thing there. And then to be able to turn it on a dime and lean into the dark circles around my eyes and my garbage truck voice and be intimidating and scary and kind of with a smile through it all. I think people enjoy the dichotomy.
I've never read about this, so I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but you're the only, I never talk about so much what I'm about to say now, but you're the only person that I could see playing Negan outside of, I've already forgotten his name, but Did you ever get an audition? Have you ever received that feedback before?
No, yeah, it's an interesting one. And the reason that I've heard it
Oh, you have?
is because of a character that I played on 12 Monkeys, which was very similar, which was this sort of wise-ass warlord in a post-apocalyptic environment, and we both had neck scarves. So there was a lot of verisimilitude, and we don't not look related. All I would say is, if you like seeing me, if people wanted to see me as Negan, watch 12 Monkeys, because I start out very Negan-esque, and then it goes a whole different direction in a surprising, wonderful way. And I am so proud of that show that the idea, I mean, I auditioned several times for Walking Dead, never that role, but I couldn't have auditioned for that role because I was already playing Deacon. I was doing Deacon for 2 years before Negan ever showed up on screen. So it's, because I mean, and people say that just because I think because Walking Dead had such a larger audience than we had, and so they know that character better, and so I could see them going, I could see why he would make sense for this role, but I'm like, well, I could certainly satisfy your desire to see me in a role like that by watching 12 Monkeys, which is great science fiction.
I love the show, and I thought I was unique, but it's nice to know that the universe feels the same way. Before we go and I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you,
Sure.
What is the one question I should have asked you?
What is the one question you should have asked me? How's your ma?
How is she?
She's good. She's going to come visit me. We're taking her to Disneyland
Visit you in Australia or in America?
in Los Angeles.
Oh, very nice. You got a smile. Is there something?
No, we're going to take her to Disneyland.
That's very sweet. Do you like rides?
I like some rides.
Okay.
I like going upside down.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
No, it makes my belly hurt.
Fair enough. I used to like it, and then, I've jumped out of a plane. I've brought this up on the last 5 podcasts, so clearly I've got an ego about it. Since doing that, I don't like rides as much.
They're not as exciting.
Yeah. Done it all. Been there, done that. I'm just joking. So before we go, how can people follow you and keep up to date with you?
T. Stashwick on Instagram, Todd Stashwick on X, and the Nerd Circus.
Awesome. Those will all be in the episode notes so people can check it out. Thank you so much. I love your philosophical
thank you, sir.
mindset. This is a real treat. And I also appreciate, I cannot hear you, but I really appreciate that you're doing this because you are jet lagged. You've just flown from America to Sydney. So you are very kind and you've been very sharp, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Great chatting with you, Mike.
I love Todd's take, or as he calls it, a framework of perception. He explains that there are no wrong turns. There's just having an openness and awareness to discovery, which I find absolutely brilliant. He encourages us to let go of the control and rigidness. For example, when the one path or road, so to speak, isn't open for us, to see that closure as a learning experience or an awareness towards an opportunity that we didn't plan on. It is okay to recognize and accept that we want the thing, or what he calls the positions on the map, but to understand or evaluate that there may be a better position on the map for our highest good. He says that when people ask him, "What do you want to do next?" he responds, "The thing I didn't plan on." This is a master skill to embrace the gifts that the world has to offer, a mentality that allows him to learn, grow, and more importantly, to enjoy the moment. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. "Be not too rigid, for you will shatter. Be not too yielding, for you will be bowed." Ian C. Esselmont. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.